And we are live. Hello on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. At least it is where I am. Sunny and warm. I was outside building a shed before I was doing this. And as soon as I'm done here, I got to go back and try to finish it. So I got that to look forward to. Now, before you ask, it's not a shed for toys. It's a shed for outdoor stuff. So it's not going to be as exciting or as fun as it sounds, and it's the instructions are not as clear as I would like them to be, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it's got to be done. We need storage outside for outdoor gear, so that's what I got to work on this afternoon. And before you ask in the comments, yes, this is my Saturday shirt, and I'm wearing it on a Sunday. I'm not trying to throw anybody off. It's just I didn't wear it yesterday, and I don't like to spend the weekend not wearing my Hello Kitty and Friends T-shirt. So it got bumped to Sunday. Gonna be probably a quick show today, solo show today. No co-hosts, no guests, no nothing. Not a ton of news. I just wanted to have a little bit more of a discussion video today. Talking a little bit about the prices of toys, about how the prices have affected at least my collecting habits. Spoiler alert, it's affected them pretty significantly. I will get into that after I get into a little bit of news. First things first, there was somebody brought this up to me. Somebody sort of pointed this out to me, and I guess I had just missed it, or like it just wasn't in the news that I was paying attention to for San Diego Comic-Con of last year, because I think the big Jada Toys news from San Diego Comic-Con last year was the Street Fighter stuff, and it got buried. But Jada Toys is doing a Chester Cheetah action figure, which was kind of news to me. It was I think Renato, my buddy Renato, mentioned it to me, and I had to go and find the pictures on this. This guy looks awesome, and I admittedly have a bit of a cheesy problem. I eat a lot of cheesies. The one of the aspects of this guy that I just thought was so funny was that he actually has like the cheesy fingers. Oh man, what is this doing? If you look at his fingers there, they've got the cheesy dust on the fingers. And not only that, but he comes with, this is a pain in the butt. He comes with like a little cheesy and then a bag of crunchy Cheetos, which I think is just such a cool figure. And it's one of those figures where I typically collect lines, but when there's an item like this that sort of has like, I'm less buying this as an action figure and more buying this as like just a funny sort of cultural thing. This is very much a purchase of like, if I see it, I'll buy it. I'm not going to go hunting after this guy. I just think it's funny that it exists. And I mean, admittedly, if it's sort of the same price as most of the Jada Toys kind of 6-inch stuff, I will probably pick this up if I see it. Where I'm going to put it, what shelf it's going to go on, I don't know. But but it's Chester Cheetah. Like, how could I not? They've got these really funny, like, little plastic whiskers and stuff, and he's got his sunglasses, which they almost look like they're removable. I'm curious to see what his eyes look like underneath there. Um, but anyway, that was sort of the first, like I said, the first not news item. Um, the next news item is, I mean, well, SH Figure Arts is doing Metal Cooler. He appears to be like fully vac metal. So he's gonna have like almost a chrome plated look. This figure looks absolutely stunning. It's got, tons of articulation because it's SH Figure Arts. It's got a really cool looking articulated tail. With SH Figure Arts, they tend to get the tails wrong so far, but this one looks a lot better. He's got the really cool kind of wire arm there. So he's a robot, spoiler if you didn't know that. So this is a robot that exists really in like one movie from Dragon Ball Z, I think. He's based on a character that's in Dragon Ball Z a little bit, but this specific one is a pretty deep cut. And to be honest, at the like $120 that I think they're charging for this thing, I'm not gonna be buying it. I don't think, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it's cool that it exists. It's cool that it's out there. Now, he appears to just be sort of a really chromed color as far as the vac metal goes. I had kind of hoped that maybe they had gone with the kind of greenish blue hue that he has in the anime. Now this is like file this one under this sort of the same place as Storm, right, from the X-Men, where like is Storm's modern Jim Lee suit white or black or silver, or is it different depending on whether it's a comic book, a trading card, or a cartoon? Was Metal Cooler meant to be chrome, but that doesn't translate in animation, so he sort of took on a shade of, well, this shade in this picture, right? It's sort of shade of greeny blue. I don't know. I just genuinely don't know. But like I said, the figure looks absolutely stunning, and really, really cool. But at that price point, I just can't swing it. I buy lots of SH Figure Arts figures, but I typically don't buy the deep cut ones unless it's like from one of the movies that I really, really like, or one of the designs that I really, really like. This is a cool figure, but it's not a character that I care about. So now, if they did Tapion, I would definitely grab Tapion. And if you know who that is, we should be friends. And if you don't, we could be friends anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Another little bit of news: the last day to pre-order direct from Four Horsemen through Store Horsemen for wave 3 of Cosmic Legions, Outpost Zaxius. This is more relevant to me that it's the last day, because this also means that for international collectors and people that buy their Four Horsemen figures through retailers, pre-orders for this will go up probably tomorrow for most retailers. So if you're not into backing the Store Horsemen and sort of paying up front, and you're going to get a pre-order in, the news is that this pre-order should open up pretty much everywhere you buy your Mythic Legions tomorrow. And for me, that is, of course, going to be eCollectables.ca in Canada. And I'm still not 100% sure whether I'm going to get any of these Cosmic Legions or not. I go back and forth. I don't want to get to a point where, there's a wave where I really love all the figures and I feel like I've missed out. So I still kind of have time. You know, the first wave hasn't even come out. I still have time to decide whether I want to pick one or two up per wave, um, and not miss out in the long run. But we'll see. We'll see. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Oh, and I don't have any pickups either. I don't think I got anything this week. I didn't even get any like $5 Friday pickups from GameStop. It's feast or famine for me. You know, I get big packages every few weeks, every month, and then there's weeks where I got nothing, which is it's weird, right? Like yeah. So instead of unboxing toys this last week or two, I've been building IKEA furniture and sheds. So that's that works too. Payne's Toy Samples is here. Tyler's hanging out. Allison Troy. Dazatron's Diorama Llama. Sorry. That one's a bit of a tongue twister, as you very well know. Cato's Collection Reviews is hanging out as well. Ted Darklaw. What's going on, Ted? Larry Reed is joined. All right, so let's see. Cato says, yeah, that chrome is impressive. It is. It looks really good. My biggest concern with that, though, is like because I'm gonna pose the figures and play with them, I'd be worried about the like the finish flaking off. Like if it is in fact vac metal, it's gonna flake off. It's gonna wear out, and it's not gonna look that good, like in the long run. So it's hard for me to justify the price for that reason, basically. Dazatron's Diorama Llama says, not a fan of the show, but the character designs are great. Yeah, fair enough. The character designs are great. It's different. I love Dragon Ball because I got into it a long time ago. I've told this story far too many times, so I won't go into it. But I got into Dragon Ball Z watching VHS, like recorded VHS from Japan. So it'll always have a soft spot in my heart. And Kato said some photos with a green light will look awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean you can light them up if it's just chrome. You can effectively make them whatever color you want in photography, which is kind of cool. Kato's in on Cosmic. You all in, Kato? Or are you sort of picking and choosing? Are you getting you know, are you getting a couple per wave or are you getting all of them? I'm curious. Daz says, Dazatron's Diorama Llama says, I'm the same, tempted but haven't taken the plunge. Yeah, I mean, they look good. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's like the vast majority of my of what I have on display is behind me. That's not it. I do have more shelves sort of on either side. But really it comes down to, and I've said this before as well, you know, is Cosmic going to take an entire shelf? And if it's going to take an entire shelf, what's going to get bumped? And then it's like, do I look at Cosmic as a line that I think is better than what's on one of my shelves? And there hasn't been that figure yet that made me go, okay, yeah, I'm in. This is deserving of a shelf in my collection. So it would be a case of like I've got a couple and they're you know either mixed in with my Mythic Legions or they'd be mixed in with a few Black Series that are on kind of a admittedly mixed shelf already. It doesn't fit. I don't have a space for them. They wouldn't be filling a void in my sort of collection. So picked up Dazatron's Diorama Llamas. Picked up. I'm just gonna say Daz from now on. Daz says picked up a few Mighty Max sets yesterday. Are those the vintage ones that you picked up? Those I used to absolutely love those as a kid. I loved the tiny little pieces. I loved that they were sort of play sets that you could take with you. I remember like vividly taking Mighty Max sets on vacation with me because I could take like 4 or 5 in a kid-sized backpack and not have any issue. Whereas, you know, with other things, and they were self-contained, right? So all the accessories and all the bits and pieces were all sort of contained and plugged in so you didn't lose them. I hated losing things as a kid. So even with my GI Joes never went far from home because I didn't ever want to lose the small pieces. In the end, I did, of course. But Larry says only thing I picked up was the new Star Wars game and of my retro Storm Shadow and Zartan from Pulse coming. Oh, nice, nice. Those are shipping from Pulse. That Star Wars game, I got the first one and absolutely loved it for as much as I played it, which was probably 4 hours. And I think if I tried to pick it up now, I would completely forget how to do it and I'd have to start all over again. I think I got nowhere because I'm not a gamer and because I just I don't have the time. There will come a day where I will go through the sort of back catalog of video games that I have, which is not that deep. Like I've got about 6 video games. I bought a PS4 to get the Spider-Man game and to get Battlefront 2. And then I got Rogue Squadron. I got that Star Wars, what's it called? Jedi, whatever. I have the G.I. Joe game, believe it or not, as well as Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. So I'm really on brand when it comes to video games. I don't buy there's a couple like now that I've watched the show, I want to play Last of Us. I've heard great things about Ghosts of Fukushima, I think it's called. But because there's this again, super on brand, because there's no toy lines connected to them, it's like I'm okay without them. Basically, I just buy video games that are tied to IPs of toys that I collect as well. Kato is picking and choosing Cosmic, but all in on Wave 1. The future, not sure. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at a little bit. Like in terms of, I went over all the waves. I think a couple episodes back we were talking about Cosmic. I think when they launched this wave, we talked about it a little bit more, and I was saying how, like in Wave 1, there's like 1 figure, and in Wave 2 there was 2, I think, and then in this wave there's 2. And then there's a couple more, but for me it was like 6 or 7 over 3 waves. Like I don't know. And then it's like, if I only want that many, do I really want the ones that I want, or am I just sort of like trying to find one that I want just to have? Anyway, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing that goes on in my head. Kato's got a soft spot for space fantasy. Yeah, me too. I mean, I grew up as a Star Wars kid. Still absolutely love Star Wars. Ironically, I don't buy a lot of Star Wars toys. I love the shows. I love the games. I love the world. But the toys never, like even the vintage stuff. I got a bunch of the Power of the Force 2 stuff as a kid, in the 90s, but it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't my favorite line, and Star Wars still doesn't grab me as far as the toys in the same way that other lines do. But Daz says Daz is fine. The vintage, good price too. Another rabbit hole. Yeah, that's the tough thing with the vintage stuff, right? It's usually easy to get the first few pieces because you can pick up, a lot somewhere, whether it's on, Facebook or at a flea market or a toy show or whatever. But then you get to the point where like you need the last couple that are like $200-300 for a set, and then it's like, okay, do I need to be the completist with the line, or am I happy with what I've got? And with Mighty Max, it's sort of like you got to make sure that you have the actual correct max for each set, and if you don't, like, do you have to chase it and whatever? So I love the vintage stuff that I've sort of held on to. I'm slowly clearing some of it out. I'm slowly selling off some of my vintage Joe stuff because I just don't play with it anymore. And a lot of it's getting replaced with classified stuff as far as figures, like as far as characters go. And as the figures get replaced, I question whether I need multiple scales of the same figure or the same character. Sorry. I mean, I have multiple classified figures of some of the characters. So do I need another scale in a vintage one? Plus, there's the thing with vintage stuff being a little bit more brittle, a little bit more fragile. Some of the stuff is worth a decent amount of money, so I'm like reluctant to pull it off the shelf. I'm looking at my vintage version 1 Storm Shadow. It's sort of like, as much as I love Storm Shadow and would love to sort of play with that, I also got the Hasbro sort of reproduction O-ring stuff. So that's the other thing is, I have a newer, you know, whiter, shinier Storm Shadow that I'm not worried about it breaking, and I'm not worried about it sort of getting played with and worn out. So should I sell off that Storm Shadow? The answer is yes. It's hard to sell off something like that because it's just a cool figure, and mine's a pretty nice version of it too. So, and then it's like I know what it's kind of worth to sell, but I wonder if it's actually worth that. So I end up selling the stuff for like lower than what it's going for typically, and then it makes me sad that it's a whole thing. Anyway, where was I? Payne, you didn't miss anything. I just went over some toy news, some old news, which isn't even news either. So, um, Horizon Forbidden West is a fantastic game. I've seen. Okay, so I don't even really know that game, but I'm pretty sure I've seen the cover, and it's like big mechanical beasts. I think in like a fantasy type scenario. I look at stuff like that, and I think that looks right at my like right up my alley, and 100% something that I would be into if I had the time. If I could find, like, if I could get through all the games that I haven't played that I own, then I would look at those. But I can't justify buying something like that and then just sitting on it and just that backlog growing and growing and growing. Kato said, Last of Us, Ghost of Fukushima, God of War, Uncharted, must-play series. Yeah, I mean, all of those, right? All of those are games that I've heard great things about that I would love to have the time to play. But the reality of working a full-time job, having 3 young kids, a pretty decent sized yard and sort of decent sized house that needs to be taken care of, and then doing videos and stuff like this. There's just not enough hours in the day. There really isn't. Video games is like, that would be the next thing I could get into. But maybe that'll be, once the kids are older and I have a little bit more time. Maybe. But in the meantime, I don't think I need to buy anymore. Although, if that Star Wars game, or when that Star Wars game goes on sale, so like Black Friday, I might pick that thing up when it drops down to like, usually those games go to about $30 for us in Canada, and at that point, I know I wouldn't even play it for the next couple of years, but I would like to have it. Payne says, Wave 3 Cosmic, all in. Armies of Ashmore, all in. It's been an expensive 2 months. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even talk about Armies of Ashmore. I will, like I intend to, when I sort of get a little more into the topic here. So I'll very quickly catch up on these last couple comments, and then I'll sort of get into the meat of the conversation today. Larry says the Black Series was very good at the beginning. Now a lot of new stuff. Hasbro seems to be phoning it in. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that. I didn't buy into Black Series right at the beginning. I only sort of got into it because of The Mandalorian. And I'm only doing the Mandalorian figures and then versions of Luke Skywalker. And now I'm kind of expanding that to Endor as a location. So if it happened on Endor, it's kind of fair game. And I adjusted that one because I know I'm gonna get the Ewoks, and then I was like, well, maybe I can get the forced, the Endor outfits for the main guys, and a couple. That might be sort of how I get a couple troopers, because it's you always need a couple troopers, but. Dot says, stop being a completist when I got back into collecting. It's far less stressful. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I'm at too, is that like, most recently with like Classified, and I'll get into this more too. But most recently with Classified, like I bought everything up until uh fairly recently. Like numbers wise, I think it was up until about 56. I can't remember the numbers anymore because the numbers are now there's so many I can't remember. But the first stuff that I started passing on was the sub team. So Python Patrol, Tiger Force. I realized that I would purely be buying those um, through sort of like that nostalgic lens of yeah, I had Tiger Force as a kid. My first Duke figure was the Tiger Force Duke. My first Roadblock figure was the Tiger Force Roadblock. So there is sort of an aspect there of like I would like to get those, but um, but I've got Duke and I've got multiple versions of Roadblock in the Classified series, so I don't need those ones. And the Deco, if I'm being honest with myself, the Deco for Python Patrol and Tiger Force, as much as I loved it as a kid, I think it looks super hokey now. I think it looks really goofy, and I just passed. There's exceptions to the rule. I mean, the Tiger Force Outback is just such a great figure. That Deco is just so good that I couldn't pass that one up. And there might be more in the future where it just the Deco just really looks good. I'm honestly thinking of Roadblock. Like if they did Roadblock with the yellow helmet with the stripes on, I mean, I might, but anyway. Payne says my backlog is shameful. 80 games and growing. Wow, 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 wow. Yeah, I mean it's one of those things, right? Like games take time. Toys for me take time. I'm not somebody that opens up a toy, you know, loads it up with its accessories, poses it kind of vanilla once, puts it on the shelf, and that's it. I'm pulling them off the shelf. I'm playing with them. Like I play with them with my kids. I'm building dios and sort of setting them up in dios and with my kid as well. Like she's got my 7-year-old has a Ninja Turtles sewer layer place. I don't even know which version it is. I think I got it for free on Craigslist. I got it somewhere for free. So that we play with the toys. So that takes up my time. I think if I didn't play with my toys, I would have video game time. I just tend. I wasn't a video game kid or I wasn't into video games so much as a kid either. I was very much more like a physical toys in my hands, out in the yard, you know, building castles out of sand in the sandbox with rivers and even out there in the snow up here in the Great White North of Canada, setting out Arctic missions, building little snow caves, stuff like that. So and that was always more my thing. I was always more sort of hands on. To this day, I pick up my PlayStation controller. I have no idea where the buttons are. So part of me getting into a new game is that I have to like relearn how to use my hands in that way because I'll go months without picking up a video game controller. And then like I said, I have to start from scratch. It's like I said, I got my PlayStation 4 to play the Spider-Man game. If I picked that up if I picked it up right now and tried to play Spider-Man, I'd have to start over. I wouldn't know what to do. And the second one's coming out. So now I'm like, oh man, do I need that one too? No, I didn't even finish the first one. PlayStation Plus games, so only pay the monthly fee, and they're mocking me from the queue. Yeah, fair enough. KJ Smith, which is a new name, says, "Sup peeps, Tiger Force are just repaints of the regular, so I also am only getting one or the other." Yeah, and that's I've said this. I've said this about Hasbro doing the Tiger Force and the Python Patrol stuff as like a pre-paint where they release that version first, and everybody sort of jumps on that one and buys that one. I'm patiently waiting here for my standard versions of a lot of those figures. Whether it's Rakondo or Bazooka. or whoever. Um, I know that they're coming. I know that if I'm patient, I'll get them. So I'm not worried in that respect. Dad says would love to see some of those dials. Toys are meant to be played with. A lot of mine are like half built, and then I sort of throw pieces together. With like I use extreme sets as well, and then foam stuff. And my big project right now, as it has been for far too long, because like I said, Dios is like the last of the priorities and all those other things that I said. So I got a whole bunch of stuff on my bench down where I work on them. But the two big projects that I'm working on right now are like a 3D version of the AWalk tabletop game board, basically. And then I'm doing sort of a big thing for Mythic Legions. I'm gonna do uh, Castle Silverthorn, Silver Horn. Anyway, the Xylonis Flock Castle. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, that's cool too. But they're very slow going. I'll spend an hour, like it feels like I'll spend an hour, you know, in a 2 week period, and then I'll go really hard and spend hours and hours. And like I'll spend every evening for a full week in there. Um, and it doesn't seem to make a difference as far as progress. Like it feels like if I'm there for 5 minutes, I can make as much progress as if I do like 3 hours. But you get lost in it. Like I lose track of time, which is why it gets dangerous, because I could be down there for far too long, and still not feel like I'd been productive. So stay tuned. It's as soon as I sort of figure out some time, I'll definitely sort of put more time into it. The AWalk board game one will probably be the next thing that I kind of finish, um, because it's less involved. It's just a lot of I just made it way harder for myself than I should have. So there's a lot of painting involved and a lot of sort of prep stuff. But my intention is to have it ready for when the game arrives, which should be relatively soon. I mean, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. The next wave up for pre-order is going to be the game wave, and so then it's the next delivery, basically, right? So it's no secret that that's up next. Now, when it's going to arrive, stay tuned for more news on that. When it's going to be up for pre-order, stay tuned for more news on that. I'll definitely be talking about it once those pre-orders go up. But for the official Animal Warriors of the Kingdom podcast, tune into to Kato's channel, actually, for the most up to the minute AWalk news. Brick has joined us. What's going on, Brick? Payne says, speaking on inflation, I'm glad the kids' version of Groot has Cosmo, so I can get my psychic dog without having to buy a whole wave. Yeah, I mean, I thought I had confused it, because there's a Groot kind of 2-pack with Cosmo, but Cosmo was just in like the last wave as a Build-A-Figure. So, if I was chasing those figures for the Build-A-Figure, I'd be a little bit bummed out that they released them so quickly. Um, Dad says the projects sound great, and they're just fun. That's the thing, is like when I have downtime, when I don't have toys to open, that's where my time goes. Comic books and diorama building. So anyway, toy pricing, inflation, how does that affect our buying? This is where I'm curious where you guys are at. So feel free to sort of answer these questions as I sort of go along in the comments there, and I'll try to bring up as many comments as I can. But basically, like, going back a couple years when prices were pretty steady and everything seemed, when things were normal, back when things were normal, or we thought they were, and GI Joe figures were $20 and Marvel Legends were $20. Um, that was primarily what I was buying. Was Hasbro products, was Hasbro 6-inch products. I knew about other stuff. You know, I knew about Mythic Legions. I knew about Kickstarter kind of boutique brands that were coming up. Um, I always liked them. You know, I'd always see them from afar. I would hear about them. I'd see the reviews in the videos or online or what have you. But I wasn't buying them because it didn't make sense. I was getting what I needed from those figures. Um, and I was spending my money on multiples in a lot of cases. So, GI Joe Classified, when a troop builder came out, I was buying a bunch of those. When Hasbro would do a figure like what's her name now? Danny Moonstar. I couldn't remember which character name they gave her because there's essentially three characters in that pack. I got three of the Danny Moonstar figures so that I could do all three of the characters. Three of um, the Cuckoo sisters. Anyway, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Multiple mans. Multiples weren't that big of a deal, and they would go on sale too. So you'd get 20% off at Toys R Us, and then they were even cheaper. And and so that's what I was doing. Then everything went sideways. Everything went crazy. Prices started going up really, really quick. Shipping started making everything more expensive. Demand was going up, so the raw materials started getting more expensive, so on and so forth. Um, Oh, sorry. I meant to preface all this by saying that I work in retail and I work in inventory management and sort of, by extension, because it's a smaller company, logistics, and I deal with vendors, and I deal with a lot of back end stuff that's very similar to sort of how the toy industry stuff works. I've never worked for a toy company. I will just put that out there. This is opinion. This is speculation. None of this is facts. Okay? I just got to put that out there. But I saw it happening at work, and it was one of those things where, at least, in the industry within, or the industry that I work within, we had kind of seen that all these dominoes were being set up, and it wouldn't take much to knock down all the dominoes. And then that happened, and it kind of flipped everything on its head. And then it was the perfect storm because what I sell is a want-based item as well, similar to toys, and so the demand for that product went up. It far surpassed the supply chain. Prices went up. People were willing to pay those prices, and we saw the same thing that everybody saw on toy shelves. Right, there was just nothing there. They couldn't make enough toys for all the people that were sort of at home with nothing better to do. Prices went up for me. Where I was buying, so Toys R Us changed ownership. Their business model changed. They were no longer doing Hasbro stuff at 20% off. Then on top of that, they actually raised their price above MSRP. So I started looking at some of the lines that I had, known about, but kind of put on the back burner because they seemed expensive. I couldn't get them at 20% off at Toys R Us is basically what it comes down to. And at the time when they were sort of $5 or $10 more expensive than what I was buying, or $20 or whatever the case may be, my I couldn't get as many for the amount of money. Then, like I said, everything kind of changed. The prices went up. Hasbro started getting a little bit funny. I do think, and again, purely this is 100% speculation. When the previous CEO of Hasbro tragically passed away, I think there was a dramatic change in their approach to how they did things. And I'm not going to bother getting into that because I just think I felt like there was a shift in how things were marketed, how things were priced, um, so on and so forth. And I started not losing faith in Hasbro because there's still like a ton of great people that work there and they're still putting on a ton of great products. But I started finding that other brands were just doing a better job. They were more in tune with collectors. They were giving people, more of what they wanted, and their prices weren't going up, right? Like their prices were fairly consistent. And I realized that I was going to be running out of space anyway. So, why not try out a couple of things? I backed the Action Force Kickstarter. That was sort of one thing. I started getting into Mythic Legions. I started looking at SH figure arts, specifically the Dragon Ball stuff. Um, Around that time, I actually got back into building Gundam models as well. It was a little bit before, but that was already sort of something that I was doing. And I've just found that when Hasbro stuff went from like 20 to 25 and now it's kind of sometimes it's 27 or 32 or like up to $35 for a 6-inch Hasbro figure, I just don't find myself as inclined to sort of buy the way that I did. And it's kind of nice. Like I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of nicer to support smaller lines. I feel better about it. And that's not a dig at, a big corporation. Um, I still respect, the legacy for me of Hasbro. I was never really a Masters of the Universe guy, so Mattel doesn't factor in quite as much for me, but um, I still respect the legacy of Hasbro, even if sort of current modern day Hasbro has kind of lost the sheen a little bit, so to speak. The shine is gone. Um, Anybody that's tuned in before will know this is no surprise that like AWOC, Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, what Jason is doing with the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom is way more interesting to me, and definitely where that's where I'm going to be army building now, and I'm not going to be army building in the same way. I think I have 10 Cobra Troopers and like 6 of the officers and like 6 Alley Vipers and on and on and on. I'm thinking, army building with Animal Warriors of the Kingdom is like 3 or 4 per, and that's army builders only. But I'm already picking up, 2 of each, for the pop and swap potential, for customizing and stuff like that. And I'm kind of doing the same thing with Mythic Legions. Those are the 2 lines where I'm probably 80% of what I'm buying is from those 2 brands right now. So, in a weird way, like the inflation and whether certain companies sort of use that as an excuse to raise prices or not, I don't know. I will not speculate on that. And I'm still buying the GI Joe classified stuff. And when they do X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 275 blue and yellow, I'll buy that. And when they do Ewoks, I'll buy those. But I'm not as invested in any of those lines. And like I said, even with GI Joe classified, while I was by default a completist up until recently, um, once I get a version of a character, as I said, early on, like once I get a version of a character, I don't know how many versions I need. So, if they're redoing Firefly, I'm not 100% sure whether I'll get the revised version or not. It'll really come down to whether I think there's something I can do with the old version, and whether the new one is an upgrade enough that it makes sense to justify buying a second one. But yeah, it's just interesting times, right? So while the boutique stuff seemed expensive before. As the prices have sort of come up on the mainstream stuff, and the availability has changed. That's part of it as well. If I have to order everything online and pay shipping anyway, that was a difference maker in some regards. If I could walk into Walmart or Toys R Us and pick up a figure off the shelf, I didn't have to pay a shipping charge. But if I have to pay a shipping charge, I mean, I may as well get a cooler figure. So, what are you guys saying in the chat here? Let's. Payne says less figures, but more diverse choices for me this year over last year. But clearance sales killing me. Yes, yeah. Payne, yeah. The clearance sales. The nice thing about at least where I am, and this isn't entirely true across Canada, but it's true for most of Canada. We don't see the clearance sales on toys anything like what you guys see at Walmart and Target. I mean, I see the price tags that people are paying for Hasbro 6-inch figures or whatever, when you guys are getting them for like 12 or 9 or like $5. We might see 20% off the full retail, which is not, I mean, it's, if you passed on it the first time, 20% is probably not going to be a deal breaker. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely gone quality over quantity, and my budget hasn't changed, right? Like that's the big thing, is that like when Hasbro raised their prices, then it was sort of, they were now competing with, I think they thought, if we raise our prices to match the price of like other lines that are out there, right? And people continue to buy the amount of figures that they're buying, we will increase our profitability. That's not how it works. I bought the number of Hasbro figures that I did because of the price. If they were more expensive, I'm buying less. That's how that works. That's how the math works on my end. I can't just magically come up with, 20 or 30% more money to sort of keep buying that way. That's not how it works. I bought far, like 2022 and 2021, I bought far fewer Hasbro. Like, it was less in 2022 than 2021, and then it was less. Or okay, let me go back. 2020 to 2021, I bought less Hasbro. 2021 to 2022, same thing, less Hasbro. 2022 to 2023, I mean, so far, what have I pre-ordered so far? Yeah, I mean, so far it's Animal Warriors and Mythic Legions. That's what I'm looking at for my purchasing for 2023. And because so much of this is pre-orders, and it's months and months out. And admittedly, because I know what's coming from Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, I'm lucky enough to sort of have the ear of Jason and Jeremy. So like I'm already kind of planning out what I'm going to be buying in like waves 4 and 5 and stuff. So that's it's a blessing and a curse. I'm no longer surprised when their stuff comes out, but at least I haven't spent all my money on something else that I don't need, like clearance figures. Paints Toy Sample says, my custom habit is part of the dynamic, so more figures and massively reduced prices. Yes, and that's the thing. If you're doing customs, clearance figures are your best friend, because paying full price to then customize it is a pain in the butt. It just doesn't work. It's just not viable. Dad says pretty much stopped buying Hasbro mainline, less and less happy with the quality. Most of the money goes on third-party Transformers, a little more expensive, but better materials, sculpt, and engineering. Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot of people like that. I think there's a lot of us that we're on a very steady diet of Hasbro for a very long time, and it's their dominance in the market, I think, is no longer there. I don't think people are satisfied. I'm very positive. I'm always very optimistic, and I'm always, the first guy to say like it's not that bad, right? When somebody does when one of these companies does something wrong and you know the figure's not perfect or there's paint rub or whatever, I'm the first guy to say like, it's not that bad. The reality is over time, you see these problems, you hear about these problems. I'm genuinely in a place where like I think Hasbro has got some issues. I think there's some things that they need to address. I hope that there's enough kind of market reaction, and by that I mean like people like me that were buying way more figures that aren't anymore. Like I said, Hasbro's not getting that money anymore, and I'm not sitting here saying people shouldn't buy Hasbro figures. I'm not saying, that I'm not saying anything, right? Buy what you love. And if all you want to buy is Black Series figures, that's great, man. Because you've still got lots of options. If all you want is G.I. Joe, if all you want is Motu, whatever it is, do your thing. Toys should make you happy, so buy what makes you happy. Hasbro figures were making me less happy, so I found a new drug, so to speak, and I'm happy that I did. Some of that third-party Transformer stuff is deadly too. It looks better than the Hasbro stuff for sure. Brick said, "No, really, there's something special about supporting a smaller company. Make new IP." And make objectively superior physical objects than the ones I buy from Mattel, etc. Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think and I've spoken about this before, right? And it's kind of what I've been talking about recently, that a lot of these people that are running these independent companies, these independent toy companies, and doing these lines, were toy collectors as kids. They grew up the same way that we did, with the same product that we did, and I think there's just a natural thing where you take something that you had, and it's much easier to improve upon that as when you're using that as your blueprint, as your template, right? The issue that I think Hasbro and Mattel are kind of stuck in is they don't want to rock the boat, because for so long they've been doing what they've been doing, and it's easy and it's safe. They're risk averse. Hasbro being a publicly traded company is has to answer to their shareholders. They have to be profitable, and the easiest way to do that is to do exactly what you've been doing. If it doesn't work, then the big corporation thing is you start firing people and shuffling things up and trying to make the money, moving the money around, right? And it doesn't make your toys better. It doesn't bring customers in. So it's, yeah, that's a tough one, man. And I think that they're lacking. I mean, they're not keeping pace basically with the smaller guys, because the smaller guys are more innovative. They gotta push the boundaries a little bit, because if they don't, then they gotta be better. They gotta be better than Hasbro. They gotta be better than Mattel. Because if they're not, why would you buy it, right? That's the reality, is that the smaller companies have to work harder. You know, Animal Warriors of the Kingdom does not have nostalgia to fall back on. Armies of Ashmore does not have the like an IP that you remember from your childhood to get you hooked. You just have to really love the product and really want to buy the product, right? And the what they're offering has to make sense. So there's that, right? There's that, and it has to make sense for the collectors. So they're going to be more competitively priced a lot of times. They just tend to be more fun, right? They can take more risks. They can do different stuff. So Payne says AWOC is definitely worth the investment after having them in hand. Yeah, 100%. And that was, I mean, I was a huge, advocate and sort of proponent for like this is a great line. People should get into this. It's going to blow up. It's going to be great before I got anything in hand. And then once I got figures in hand, it was absolutely, full speed ahead. I admittedly, like, I was a little bit worried that, I would tell all these people to get pre-orders in and get orders in for figures sight unseen, and then the product could show up and just be absolute garbage. But I'm happy to say that it is absolutely not. And I'm not the only one to say that. Look at all the reviews. um you know like all the toy tubers are sort of raving about how much they love these figures, how much fun they are in hand, how good the quality is, right out of the gate. Wave one, first shipment. They're just really, really good figures. And like I said, the comic book is fantastic. So the lore is a lot of fun. If you haven't read the comic book, I strongly recommend you hit up spirotoys.com. Get the digital download version for $2. Give that a read through, and you won't be disappointed. KJ Smith, I agree. I've been happy with third party and small companies products this year. Yeah, I mean, I think that's I'll be the first to admit that, like, even this last wave of GI Joe figures, the Outback, Cover Girl, Falcon, um, Crimson Bat. I didn't buy the Mad Marauders Barbecue, but the QC seems off. There seems to be like a 10% difference in the quality of this wave specifically over previous waves, and I hope it's something that Hasbro can fix, because I still want more GI Joe figures. If I see another sort of 10% decrease in the quality, then I'm really gonna have to start considering whether or not I want more GI Joes, and then I could be really, really picky at that point and be like, okay, I'm only getting specific characters. But we'll see. Paints toy samples 20 to 30% more money. We need an OnlyFans for toys. Yeah, I mean, look, if I had a way to generate more income to cover that, I'd probably still be buying the same stuff. But um, I'm not prepared to go there just yet. Smaller companies aren't afraid to take the chance, even if it doesn't hit. Yeah, that's the thing, right? These are passion projects. These are labors of love for people. This is not, um, a toy line is not a get rich quick scheme. Um, you have to be invested in it for the long haul, because you're also not going to make any money in your initial offering, right? You're doing your Kickstarter basically to have the um, have the financial assets to get the tooling done and to get the stuff manufactured and so on and so forth, and then it arrives and you ship it out and you're kind of at net zero. And hopefully you have a little bit left on the side to get wave two out, get it to people, because then I think it's wave three, wave four, wave five. That's when you start sort of seeing a little bit of return on investment. But it's probably not much, if I'm being totally honest. I can't imagine there's nobody's getting rich off of this. Um, Kato says, I second that. I think that was in regards to when I was saying that there's some sort of QC issue with the GI Joe figures. I think that's when that one popped up. Brick something says, I think a hit for a smaller company is easier to achieve than Hasbro or Mattel. I just don't know to what degree. How many of a Masterverse fig is made? 100,000? AWOC 5,000? Asking, I don't know. Probably. I've had discussions with different people at different toy companies, just people that I know that would kind of know the answers to those. I don't know the answers to those. Most companies aren't really willing to tell you, because, well, I don't know why, but I do know that that's probably the market for Masterverse is got to be way bigger than other stuff. And like Hasbro too, right? The GI Joe stuff or the Black Series, right? It's definitely tens of thousands versus 10,000 or less for the small guys. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think basically MOQ, like minimum order quantity for most factories, is like 1,000 units of a SKU. Now I don't know how many of every SKU is going to be made. I don't know how many of any SKU is made. But I mean, let's look at it. Let's assume that's the case. Let's assume that 1,000 units is a minimum order quantity for an action figure. And let's assume at sort of the high end that 100,000 is being made by the big guys for some of the big lines. Economy of scale, right? Like, so the idea that basically the more you make, the cheaper it is to make each unit. That's the very, very basic thing. You've got your sunk costs, so you've got your mold fees, shipping fees. No, shipping's scalable, so it's not entirely. So your sunk costs are basically like your molds, your employees, your like, your warehouse, whatever fees you got to pay, stuff like that. Where if you make one unit, it's the same as if you make 100,000 units. Then production costs, so if you make 1,000 action figures, your production costs are generally scaled. So the fewer you make, the more it is per unit. But then you're breaking that the sunk costs down over fewer units as well. So let's say the mold costs $1,000, and I can assure you it doesn't. If you make 1,000, your mold costs are $1 per unit. If you make 100,000, it's like a penny, right? So it's a negligible cost at that point. All of these things factor in, right? The little guys are making so much less money, but in weird ways, there's also like, if you're working out of your house, right? If you're a toy line that's effectively being run out of a house, you're already living in your house, so your cost there is kind of negligible. If you're Hasbro, you've got this big giant office that has way too many employees. Now, I don't think anybody should get fired or laid off or anything like that. I'm just saying, you've created a monster, and it's sort of, it is what it is, right? Like, you've got a gigantic building where everybody works, and so there's a cost when you're sort of on that end of the spectrum as well. But yeah, so all that stuff factors in, right? Like, but basically, long story short, the big guys pay far less per unit, which is why they can kind of get away with dumping excess stock for discounted rates. When you have far fewer units, you really need to sell them at a particular margin to kind of break even. And I don't mean cost. That's the other thing. People kind of think that, like, the cost of a thing is the cost, right? Like, let's take Pale, for example. I don't know how much he costs to make. But let's say, this figure costs, $10 to make, and then it's sold for $35. Well, it's not like Jason's making $25 off this figure, right? Jason's got to pay $10 to make it. Then he's got to pay a couple bucks to ship it. Then he's got to pay for the packaging. Then he's got to pay for advertising. Then he's got to pay for this, that, the other thing. He's got to pay to get, it's, at the end of the day, he's probably making a couple bucks off each figure, if that. And then he's got to survive, right? He's got to eat. He's got to pay to keep a roof over his head. Whereas, you look at a Hasbro figure, and like I said, if you sort of economy of scale, that exact same figure probably costs them $1 to make. But then there's sort of more hands pulling a little bit, So I don't know. I mean, it's not simple math. It's not simple math. But needless to say, at this point, as I've said, I'm definitely going the way of the small guys, because they're more fun. Brick says, I assume Hasbro selling Mythic Legion's numbers of a figure would make their shareholders and CEO cry crocodile tears. Yeah, well, that's it, right? Like, that's it, is that they have to move more units because it would be seen as a failure to them to only sell, 10,000 units or something like that. Larry Reed says, it's very strange for Hasbro to not release the deluxe scale Transformers to big box store. Which ones are those? The deluxe? Are the deluxe ones like the Arc? Is that what you mean, or is that's even bigger? That's Titan class? Sorry, I don't know what deluxe scale Transformers is. Is that the like $60 ones? I can't remember. I knew this for a minute. I was buying some of the Earthrise stuff, or the War for Cybertron, because I got some from all three waves, but I don't remember specifically what scale was which version. Oh, parched. Larry said no, they're like the 45 version. Okay. So, yeah, so they're not the tiny ones and they're not the huge. They're just like right in the middle there. Okay. Dialsatron's Diorama Llama said the big guys are still cutting corners. The amount of gaps and use of waffles to reduce plastic is becoming more prevalent. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that, right? Like, there's definitely and I hate to say it, but it definitely feels like with Hasbro. And again, like I said, people kind of label me a particular way because I sort of give them the benefit of the doubt. But like in a conversation like this, I'm happy to say, like, it definitely feels like they're cost cutting. It definitely feels like they're putting they're trying to kind of wring out every last drop of profit that they possibly can. And I genuinely think that it's starting to backfire. I genuinely think that it's you can only go like, it's one thing to do like plastic free packaging for, say, Monopoly, right? Because that's a very different product than a GI Joe classified figure. The audience, the buyer, the market for it is very, very different. I think there's a boardroom meeting where some of these decisions are being made, and I bet that there are people in these brand teams, whether it's a GI Joe brand team or a Transformers brand team or a Star Wars brand team, that's kind of shaking their heads and kind of shrugging and saying, like, look, we don't think that this is what collectors want. But I don't think it's their call to make. That's the sad thing. It's that I think it's a product of, again, those companies just being so big that there's decisions being made without the proper knowledge, without the proper understanding of who the market really is. And when you try to cut corners with quality on a product that is gonna get dissected under the microscope, like a classified figure would, for example, there's tons of people doing their unboxings and reviews and stuff like that, and those people are going to see the QC issues, right? If the elbows don't match the rest of the arm, people are going to notice that. They're going to mention it. If the paint apps are weird, I remember there was sort of one of those Spider-Man figures, and I don't think it's like a massive percentage of these Spider-Man figures that had this issue. It's just there's enough people talking about them that you see it, where like the webbing wasn't printed on sections of Spider-Man figures, and it's just like, that's factory QC, that's factory level QC. They're not inspecting everything before they pre-package it. Now, whether that is, and again, I think the confusion is that, like, that Hasbro is like necessarily aware of those QC issues, and they might not be until that stuff reaches market, right? Because Hasbro's sort of trusting that these factories are going to are going to uphold their QC standards. If they don't, Hasbro doesn't know until they start hearing feedback. That's the reality of it, right? Like it gets packed in Asia, it gets shipped to North America, it gets distributed in North America. A lot of it not through Hasbro, right? Walmart gets their stuff straight from China. Target gets their stuff straight from China, and Hasbro reps or employees don't see it until they start seeing the reviews as well and start getting the angry emails or whatever. So it doesn't there's not somebody from Hasbro sort of standing over the production of every figure and being like, you know what, ship them out anyway. We see that there's a QC issue and ship them out anyway. I don't think it works that way. Larry says the guy making $2 an hour does really care. Well, I think you need two. What do you mean? Like the guy making $2 an hour in China doesn't really care? I mean, yeah. I mean, they probably get bonuses for producing more, right? Like they're probably under a goal of like the more units per hour that you can do, at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, or, whatever it is, you might get more money. QC would play a part in that, but QC is a funny one. Like, and again, I don't know how QC works with toys, but in the industry that I know, different brands will set the QC standards for the factory. Like each one will basically sign off on an amount of QC that is sort of acceptable tolerance. No factory in the world producing anything is under like a QC sort of performance level of like 0%, right? Like that just doesn't happen. There's always going to be a couple 2-3% of sort of failed product. It's sort of the easiest way to say it. Now the goal is for that failed product not to get to market, right? The goal is to have it get pulled out in production, but it doesn't always, right? Sometimes it ends up in store, and that's where they're. My nose is so itchy. I'm trying not to be like all up in my own face too much. Jeez. I was working outside. I think it's just dusted. Anyway, that didn't fix it, by the way. It's still itchy. I'll just stop itching it and just deal with it. Like QC exists, and the hope is that QC in production doesn't get to the consumer. So it's sort of diligence at a factory level. It's again, if you're trying to push through quota numbers, you might turn a blind eye, right? So that's where that issue comes up, and then it's an issue of like, are these companies in constant enough communication with their factories to, this is so far off inflation and how it affects my toy buying, but anyway, you hope that toy companies or whatever company is like in touch with their factory enough to kind of know what the numbers are looking like and sort of all that kind of stuff, but that's just not the reality. So there's always going to be a batch where something goes wrong, and more of that batch makes it to market than previous batches, and hopefully future batches, right? And that's why I was saying this last batch or this last wave of G.I. Joe Classified seemed to be kind of subpar compared to what we've seen. And hopefully Hasbro can fix that. Hasbro, I've heard that Hasbro is aware of the issues and sort of what happened, but they didn't know about it, like I said, until it was sort of delivered. And so they know about it. We'll see whether that translates to it being sort of fixed going forwards. But But the idea that QC issues are not going to exist. QC issues exist in literally every product. That's just how it is. And then it becomes a thing of like, okay, do we think Hasbro is doing a worse job because there's actually a higher incidence, like a higher incidence rate of, QC problems, or are we just hearing more about it because we're in this echo chamber of toy collecting, right? Are we watching more reviews of that Spider-Man figure, and so we're seeing more issues with it because there's a bigger sample size? Is it reflective? I also think that there's a thing where you don't hear about the stuff that doesn't have QC issues. Every satisfied customer, right? Let's sort of rephrase that. For every like 100 satisfied customers that say nothing about the product that they get, there's going to be one very vocal dissatisfied customer, right? So if we focus on the dissatisfied customer and we go like, oh yeah, that brand sucks, it's like, well, no, that's not really accurate. It's just, the loudest voice in the room happens to be the person that's upset with what they got for whatever reason, whether it's something breaks, or it's missing an accessory, or it's missing a paint app or whatever. It's hard not to hear the loudest voice in the room. So Dazatron's Diorama Llama says, interesting discussion, Adam. Time for me to log off, but I'll catch you again soon. Well, thank you for joining me, Dazatron's Diorama Llama. I'm just about done. Like I said, I wanted to do a bit of a shorter one because I do still have some more shed to build to finish off, hopefully, before I can get back in here and play with my toys once the sun goes down. But it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. It's always fun to chat. I keep missing. I know what you're talking about, Brick. I'm not. Yeah, I mean the loudest voice, right? Like there's always going to be somebody. And whether they have a genuine sort of concern with a product, or whether they are just a contrarian, or they just I don't want to single anybody out. I don't want to name names or anything like that. But look, there's always also going to be an element of like there's going to be an individual who doesn't feel like his voice is heard. And social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram, whether it's YouTube, they're going to be vocal just to be heard, right? And sometimes they're going to say things that they don't even mean to elicit a response, so that they feel heard, so that they feel like somebody's listening to them. It's a very real thing. It is a very real thing. And I mean, I'm not mad at anybody ever. That's kind of my thing, right? I'm not mad at Hasbro for sort of QC things. I can just move on if I want to. I'm not mad at Jason for not shipping my AWOC stuff to me as quickly as I wanted him to. I'm not mad at the guy who's shouting at the top of his lungs that that people shouldn't buy a particular product because he doesn't like it. I'm not mad at anybody. Do your thing and be happy. If you're not, if you're not hurting anybody, I don't see any issue. I got pretty thick skin. I mean, I can take it if somebody disagrees with me, if somebody wants to sort of throw mud at me. I'm okay with that. I mean, if somebody's not coming at me with a weapon or whatever, I'm good. I'm good. Words are fun, but they can be. I mean, I can get into it with people if I want to, but it just they don't hurt. They don't hurt. Not long term, at least. This sums it up, though, too. Payne's Toy Sample says, inflation is hitting everyone in different ways. Toys are a want, not a need, and you just have to ride it out. 100%. We don't need any of this stuff. So that's, at the end of the day, we got to keep that in mind, right? If, you know, if toys bring you joy and you can't afford them, like I genuinely feel bad for people. Like if their issue is really that they would love to have more toys in their life and they can't. Um, I'm genuinely sympathetic because that's my toys are my escape, right? My toys are a way to kind of switch off from the world, kind of go into whatever world it is, right? Whether it's the world of Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, whether it's the world of Mythos and Mythic Legions, whether it's, you know, the world of GI Joe, whatever it is, right? Like it's just it's an escape, and it's you know, it lets me clear my mind and do all that kind of stuff. So um you know, if you have to adjust your buying patterns, you have to adjust your spending habits, so be it. You know, I just hope that everybody is able to sort of still find a little bit of joy, still find a little bit of room in their budget to pick something up here and there. um you know, whether you know, if your payday is on a Friday, you know, and you got to wait. This is always my strategy, right? Because these are want based. My toy spending habits go like this. I get paid once a month. I'm on salary, so I get the same amount of money every month. I don't have overtime, so I can't work extra hours when I know, you know, the pre-order's coming up or whatever. And I'm going to finish with this. This will be sort of my last thing, and then I got to get going. Um, so I know how much is coming to me at the end of the month. My paycheck comes in, put it in the bank. I transfer almost all of it to my wife, who is the sensible one with money in the relationship, so that, you know, all the mortgage is covered, the groceries are covered, you know, the car insurance is covered, all that stuff is covered before I can even touch the money. And then I sit on it honestly for about 3 weeks. And then when I know my next check is coming up and I'm not going to be, you know, broke, if I buy toys, that's when I kind of look at, okay, well, what can I buy this month? And I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying my spending habits have always been bad. But the way that I found to sort of make it so that they're a little bit better is to just hold off a little bit longer, hold off a couple extra days, hold off, you know, a couple extra weeks or whatever it is. Because the reality is, if there's a month that comes where I don't have the money to buy a new toy, maybe I just dig to the back of the shelf and find a toy that I haven't pulled out in a while, pull that out and just sort of remember the joy, remember the fun of that toy. And then beyond that, right, build dioramas, right? Get some cardboard, get some cheap paint from Michael's. Start with something simple, right? As a 5-year-old kid, you know, I made a castle out of a cardboard box and cut, you know, a drawbridge in it. And I don't even know if I used paint. Just go back to that. Just go back to that. Go back to the fun, to the joy of the simple things. Um, and and appreciate what you have. Appreciate what we all have, right? I mean, we're I mean, I assume you're in an English speaking first world country. If you're not, you know, I you know, tune out now. But I mean, most of us are pretty comfortable. Most of us are in a pretty good situation. I think if you're watching this video, um, you know, you're in a pretty comfortable situation. It might not seem like that all the time. That's fair. But yeah, just remember that it could be a lot worse, right? Um, but again, thank you guys for joining me. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. It's I'm slowly kind of creeping up as far as subs go, but it's always um, it's not an ego thing, but it is validating to know that, you know, people appreciate what I'm doing, and it does help keep me motivated to keep going and to do more. So if you can hit that like button and the subscribe button, great. If you want to hit the notification button, all the better. That way you'll get notifications when I'm doing videos and when postings go up for sort of what's next. Um, Thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you all again very, very soon. Stay tuned for, that's not the one I wanted. This is the one I wanted. Stay tuned. Coming up, Brick Something and I worked. We did a recording of an AWalk video that's coming up really soon. It's going to be posted to both of our channels about the comic book. So we're going to start doing a little bit more talk about AWalk lore and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, whatever day it is that you're watching this. Thank you for the people that were watching live. Anybody catching it on the replay, I appreciate you as well. I see you. I see you in the view count. I see you in the comments. So I appreciate you. Until next time.